Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo.
Part of the experience is a negative one in going away to college. Almost all students have certain fears, anxieties. Everyone has their depressions that come.
Today on Reflections, Father Bacik talks with Norman Gadan, who is the head of the Counseling Center at the University of Toledo. Father Bacik and Mr. Gadan will discuss college and the family dealing with depression. And now, here is Father Bacik.
Norm, I'm glad that you were willing to take time out from your busy schedule, and I know I've imposed on you a lot to talk with me on the program, but also you could think of it in more positive ways. It's not just taking away from your time, but it's an opportunity to push your latest book. And you know, when
That's
people,
a good point, Jim. I'm glad you mentioned that.
When people come on the talk shows on TV, they usually have a book to hold up,
that's
and
right.
I don't see a book in your hand, but I know that you did do a book recently, so I'll give you 30 seconds to tell me about it, and then we're going to talk about some of the content of it.
Thank you. Let me say first how happy I am to be back tonight on your program, and I want to wish say a special hello and warm greetings to your mother. Our book is Parenting Through the College Years, and it's co-written by a very fine writer, Sally Valongo, who's a feature writer for the Toledo Blade and a writer for their Sunday magazine supplement, a friend and a colleague, and also a parent of a college student. In our case, we have two kids in college beginning in the fall, so whatever we're going to talk about tonight is a very personal interest. And
Tell me how this book came about, anyway.
Well, it began with our work during orientation in the summers at the University of Toledo, the last 10 summers, in which we lead workshops and discussions with parents during the orientation of their students. And as an outgrowth of that, we realized that the parents often are sort of out of sorts. They don't know quite where they fit in. They know they're supposed to help as much with money as they can, but short of that, they really don't know quite how to behave. The kids are changing. They're often in a kind of a minor rebellion. Communication is sometimes difficult. And it's very tempting for a parent of a new college student to say, I've raised him, I've supported him, I'll help as much as I can financially, but in any other way, they're kind of on their own. They're independent. I don't have anything else to do. That's what some parents have done, and in our view, that's not always the most effective or appropriate way to behave. So our
There's another kind of behavior you see a lot, and those are the over-solicitous parents. Who,
that's right.
Who
can't do enough.
Bugging them all the time. And so
want to know everything.
Right.
They're worried and controlling, and they have to know every detail, and they want to know every aspect of the kid's life, and they're always sending them notes and letters and gifts and showering them with things, and that's the other side of it.
You know, I was trying to think of a wider interest in your book, which is called Parenting Through the College Years. I would think that there's other people interested in all of that as well, even people who don't have offspring in college right now. Some of people are looking forward to it in the future. Some have been through the experience and are probably interested in sort of checking out how they did and what mistakes they made and what good things they did. And I think always university life has a broader meaning in our culture because it's a major institution in our world. It does a lot by way of shaping how our society goes. We're training leaders for the future. And so, in a sense, every American citizen has to be worried about the quality of education, interested in improving our academic performance, and so on. So I believe a lot of the things that you have put into this book do have that kind of general interest. Now, I want to focus the discussion a bit. That's
okay.
Part of my job on this program. And I'd like to talk about the relationship between parents and students from the viewpoint of one of the problems students face, and that is the feeling of depression, of being lonely in the new situation, of perhaps being homesick, something that happens in the early months of going off to school. You and I deal with those kind of students periodically, especially at the beginning of the year, I suppose, and at exam time when people get down, it gets intensified. But surely part of the experience is a negative one in going away to college. Almost all students have certain fears, anxieties. Everyone has their depressions that come. It's often cyclical. It arises and then goes away, and people don't understand why it happens, and there's a lot of confusion about all of that.
Right.
And I think one of the things that happens is that the behavior of the students then towards their family, towards their parents or siblings at home, really it changes, and people are puzzled and say, why is this going on, and ultimately how are we going to deal with it? Let's just stay a few moments with your experience of dealing with the loneliness, depression syndrome that I'm talking about.
I'm glad you put it in the context of being something most of us experience now and then, and we do, for an hour or two, sometimes for a day or 2, 3 maybe, but it tends to lift, and for most of us it's sort of a fleeting experience, and we don't stay depressed, feeling sad and low and blue and lonely for weeks or months on end. We also don't exhibit some of the other characteristics of a depression that might get us to go to see a counselor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, or if we're a college student, at least to let our parents know and see if they have some ideas. In depression, there often are disturbances in eating, digestion, sleeping. In a serious depression, there would most typically be a loss of weight, 10, 15, 20 pounds in a month.
People simply are not eating
regularly. They really experience
not
it
interested
as
in eating.
Losing interest in food and simply not eating. Sleeping in a serious depression is often affected. Sometimes people can't get to sleep. More commonly, they can get to sleep a bit later than usual, but wake up at 3, 4, 5 in the morning and then just can't go back to sleep. Sometimes feelings of anxiety, sadness, fatigue, and the prevailing theories are that it has something to do often with a loss or a disappointment or a change, a big change, such as coming to college, a loss of the family support, a loss of friends, a loss of familiar room. And we must remember, too, that depression or depressed feelings and sadness are not uncommon among college parents either. I remember going by my son's room during the first month or two. He was in Columbus, and tears just beginning to well up in my eyes as I'd go by, and then I'd sort of blink them shut and say, you shouldn't do that. You know all about this. In fact, you're sort of a self-styled expert on being a college parent. But, of course, it's there for me as well as for anybody else. And the more we work with parents like this in the summers, the more we see them open to a whole range of emotional experiences having to do with their kids going to college and growing up, and them wanting to stay involved, but finding it very hard to change and to find just the way to behave so that the kid doesn't feel controlled or manipulated or put down, but rather supported and facilitated.
Now let's talk about that loss. You're associating this depression with a sense of loss of the familiar, loss of what's comfortable, being, and I suppose the correlative of that is being thrown into the new and having to deal with the new situation. And of course that is what we've got going here. People coming out of high school where they had all these friends and knew where their locker was and what they were supposed to do. And
it's a major transition.
Knew how to deal with the teachers and so on, and had their support group and so on. Now they're in a college situation, and it's larger, it's more complex, there's more people to deal with, and it's there's new demands on them. Maybe the studies are harder and so on. So it is not surprising that we have people who are feeling down, and I don't think we have to think that's unusual, that this is just part of going through any kind of loss or dealing with the new, radically new in their life.
In addition to the transition, the major life transition for the student and for the family, or to the feelings of loss or disappointment, supposedly in depression, and I don't know if it's true for everyone, but supposedly in it there are underlying conflicts over the student's need for to be taken care of and to be dependent, and underlying conflicts over hostility. And these kinds of conflicts are expressed either directly with sort of bitterness combined with the sadness, or outright anger combined with the sense of being lost and lonely, or with some combination, direct or indirect, of these kinds of feelings: loss, sadness, anger. So I might just say it's not always so easy to be of help or to get help for someone who's depressed.
So parents might experience this in a way of having their student off at school and then calling on the phone and blowing up over the phone.
Exactly.
And the student who wanted all this independence and was
Right.
always chafing
Right.
under the rules at home and so on, now suddenly has that freedom, and yet they seem different, so that an anger
Right.
comes out, and the parent doesn't know what to make of that. And what we're probably dealing with is a lot of insecurity. The student doesn't know how to handle the new freedom as they thought they would enjoy it so much. It's sort of overwhelming, and they're striking out in some way. That's that hostility you were talking
Right.
about.
You sometimes see this very dramatically in a student who will call a parent, the first couple of days of school, and say, "Please come get me. The school's no good. The food's lousy. The kids are horrible. The teacher's no good. Everything's horrible." And of course, at that point, they may have only gone through registration. They may not have met anybody, gone to class, and you just have this. You realize that the student has been maybe depressed through the summer, maybe through the latter part of high school. It's been building up toward this, and that the parent at that point had better say to themselves, let me listen to this. What's going on? Rather than getting in the car, rushing over, and taking some kind of action.
So first they have to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
So, and we don't want them to make any quick decision like, yes, drop out of school. I mean, my own inclination would be in that kind of situation as a counselor, if the student comes to me that way, is to say, hey, let's hang on here. You know,
Exactly.
I would be looking for a larger perspective, like we got to give this a decent try here. I mean, we can't give it up so soon. Maybe things will look better in another couple weeks. So let's try to slug our way through it and hang on.
Especially important. I don't want to focus so much entirely tonight on the negative, but it's especially important where depression is concerned to keep in mind the possibility, however remote, of suicide. When students are talking about their feelings, the depression, the unhappiness, it's something just to keep in the back of your mind, either as a student or as a parent listening to them.
I notice these days I don't hesitate, Norm, too much to say at times, are you feeling suicidal?
Mm-hmm.
How bad is this thing? Are you feeling like you have
Psychologists and psychiatrists used to be trained to say, are you considering or are you thinking about doing anything to hurt yourself? I think we're all a lot more comfortable today and more forthright, and we say, are you thinking of killing yourself or of doing something else to bring serious harm to yourself?
Right, yeah. And Ed, I've noticed that seems to be a helpful question, and people often stop and ponder it, and I usually feel like I get a reading out of that. Like somebody say, oh, no, it's not that bad, I'm nowhere near that bad, or someone else starts to hint at it and say, well, I've had these fantasies that worry me a little, and these ideas flash through my mind. I don't know what to make of them, and they're sort of scary to me, and then you got a chance to talk about it. But
suicide's often a form of communication, and can often be a request or a plea for help, or sometimes a desire to hurt someone or to bring harm to somebody.
One of the things I've been thinking lately, Norm, with this whole depression, suicide thing, especially of our young people, is that one of the things that they don't know yet in their life is that depressions come and go.
Right.
That you can be depressed for 3 months,
Right.
and then it may well lift. And I think when
not
some
permanent.
college students in the middle of a 3-month depression that would run its ordinary course end up thinking, I can't live like this anymore. I can't take it anymore. This is how it'll always be. And if it's always like this, I want out. I can't handle it. And I think we need to sort of bring this into the mix as well.
That's a good point. I think that's especially true with younger students, say in late high school, that commit suicide, or younger students first second year of college.
Yes.
They think those feelings are permanent. It'll never lift. Life will never change, and they have to make this pressure. There's pressure toward making this decision. And I think it's important for all of us as parents, as educators, to keep reminding and teaching young people that things do change. It may be for a week or a month or 6 months, but it typically does change, and generally the depression will lift. College parents, we like to be keep informed about mental health services on campus, that there are counseling centers, mental health centers, there are services in the community, and that they themselves as a parent can improve upon their sensitivity to their students and their ability to listen. And if they get hints that there's been a major disappointment in their kid's life, that the student is withdrawing from social life, that they're not dating or they're not having as many relationships as they used to, or they in some other way are more specifically bringing their affairs to a conclusion, such as drawing up a will. And you occasionally will see that in a college student who you wouldn't think would be really thinking along those lines, it begins to draw up a will or make plans for their death and decide on the kind of funeral that they want. If parents hear that, listen carefully, try and understand it, and if necessary, make suggestions or even take stronger steps to see the students get help.
Now, you mentioned
Because
before some of the agencies are, well, obviously the counseling centers on the campuses
Right.
are helpful. That's your kind of business, and you need to do that. I think people from religious backgrounds and who belong to churches or synagogues are often, there are religious people, religious leaders around in the campus setting who might have share the sensibilities of the parents. They feel comfortable calling up their local priest and
Right.
saying, my Catholic daughter here might need some help, and so on, and get them over. I notice that when I get calls like that, I find myself being very responsive and thinking that we better check out and see how serious this thing it is. But something else that comes to me is that I often like it if the parents can get the offspring to come over.
Exactly.
You need to make them make that initial effort so that they're seeking some help. We all know, dealing with some young people, when they get into that mood, you don't have much of a chance at it unless there's an opening receptivity to making something happen here. So they got to be willing to talk to you about what the problem is. If they're sullen, well, you just can't do a lot about it.
I'm glad you mentioned some of the other kinds of help, because I think that's exactly what we try to emphasize with parents during the summer, that there not only are the traditional services, health center, counseling center, and physicians on campus, but if they feel more comfortable, there are the spiritual, there's the spiritual help, rabbis, priests, ministers. In some cases, they may feel more comfortable turning to the student's academic advisor or a faculty member or an administrator. And generally, it's better to encourage the student to seek the help themselves, but in those few instances where severe depression or suicide or some of the other very, very serious illnesses or disturbances exist, we encourage parents to take even more direct action, to call the administrator, call the priest, call the psychologist, seek information, find out more specifically about the services available, and to get the student to it if necessary.
Norm, I'm thinking that one of the things that in dealing with all of this is the general support that parents need to show for their sons and daughters when they go away to college, and in preparing them to do that. One of the things I like about your book is that you have 6 of this and 7 of that, and I know that reality isn't like that. There's never 6 of anything, and other than stones lying on the road or something. But when we're dealing with human relationships, they are very multiple and complex, as we know, and yet the listings are always helpful, and because they direct our attention. And one of the things I remember from your book is that you've got something like 8 ways to support college students, and I doubt if I have time to really talk to you about all 8 of those, but why don't we look at some of those and see. And I think that, if parents are saying, how am I going to support my kid when he's depressed at school, probably we're going to find some guidance in these 8 ways that you have talked about here. So would you tell me what
Sure.
the first of those are, or whatever background you want?
We have 8 ways or 8 goals for college parents. Why don't I just tell you maybe 3 at a time? I think that might be a good number for you.
I might want to comment on them. Tell me one and see if I want to comment on it.
Okay. The first one is maybe one of the most obvious, and we say that parents should do what they can to support students by way of helping to reduce unnecessary or undue student anxiety.
Okay, now, so we get the student calls home, and they seem to be more upset than they ought to be about this college situation here. Like, he never complained that much while he was in high school and so on about, and here he's got this roommate that he can't stand. So what I got to do now is listen to him and find out what is wrong here and what's the real conflict with the roommate, what stands behind it, and maybe make a simple suggestion about a way to improve it. Like, well, why don't you study in the library instead of studying in the room or soming?
Exactly.
Now, that would help to reduce the anxiety.
Simple suggestion.
A lot of this is common sense, right?
Yes, we've not. A lot of it's common sense,
right?
And a lot of it is the way parents automatically behave.
So we're going to reduce
the anxiety, be supportive, be reassuring, counsel time, A second one, help your son or daughter identify with the college which they've chosen. So many parents really don't realize that they're playing a game in which they go contrary to the student's choice. Student may be going to Harvard and all they talk about is Yale. Students going to the University of Toledo and all they talk about is, well, why aren't you going to a residential school? And in fact, it's possible to learn and grow and develop at almost every college or university in the country. And it's, I think, it's only later in college that students realize this. At the beginning, it's where are you going? Why are you going? That's all the kids are preoccupied with. So our notion is, and there's some research which supports the idea that if college parents understand and are informed and support the choice of their kids, that the students are less likely to drop out and more likely to graduate. Everything else equal.
Right. Now, this would be helpful for parents to know about the school, wouldn't it? The good things that go on there, maybe to attend athletic events with their kids now and then, to know something of the tradition of the school, to know what its strengths are and maybe its limitations as well. And to maybe to talk it up in a way. I guess what wouldn't be good
not a phony way, but a realistic way.
Yeah. Now, if parents went the opposite way and kept tearing the school down, or saying, "Why are you in college?" or "Why are you going to that school?" then we're going to create problems. So the supportive parents are going to know a bit about the school and where possible, support it and encourage their youngsters along that line.
A third one is, it really fits in to some extent with the other two, is that parents should try to reduce the conflict between their student and the family, or between their student and the institution. And this may mean developing better ways to communicate within the family about all kinds of problems associated with attending college: money, transportation, clothes, what have you, and also to help the student by being sensitive and empathic with them, to reduce conflict that exists between the student and the college or university they're attending.
Now, what about, you mentioned the word money in all of that. I suppose that's one that people have to work out, like talk about how much is expected that way, try to work out reasonable ways of paying for things, and
work out ways of managing their personal expenses. Students are no better than the rest of us, learning how to budget, how to make up a minimal budget. Deciding to some extent who pays for which fees and expenses.
One thing I was thinking with that is the importance of each of the participants in this mix of not having resentments. I mean, I can imagine parents saying, "I never had the chance to go to college, and I made it fine in life, and now here everyone's got to go, and so I got to sacrifice vacation so that my kid can go to college. And what's this all about?"
Especially with a student who doesn't try very hard, isn't very motivated, kind of lost, and where the parent senses they're wasting their time.
You touched a nerve there. I mean, parents saying, "I'm spending all this money, and the kid's out partying."
Yes.
And,
yes.
Or
you get the other side of the coin too. You get the parent who, as many of us today, in jobs and with incomes that don't rise very rapidly, maybe can't give our kids the level of a college education that we ourselves had. And the parent who feels kind of vaguely guilty about it. Maybe they went to Ohio State, but they can only afford to send their kid to the University of Toledo and have the kid live at home and work. 70 or 80% of our students work. Or maybe the parent who went to an elite Ivy League school but can only afford to send their student to a public four-year school in Ohio. And you get a lot of feelings about that. A little bit guilty, a little bit ashamed, a little bit rationalizing, and it can be very uncomfortable. And instead of being, and it's not something most parents can very freely talk about with their kids. They can among and between themselves and with each other, but it's sort of hard to admit to yourself, but certainly to your kid, I couldn't do as well by you as my parents did by me.
And
yet it's kind of it seems to be on the increase.
Yeah, if a parent said that, I mean, that would be take a big person, and I could see that producing very good conversation and understanding. So we're trying to reduce the tensions here in relationship to the family and the university.
Do you want to go on with some of these other support? Okay.
Give me the next one.
The other one we've hit on here in general, help to promote the adjustment to college. This is not just the money, but studying, employment, time commitments, health, extracurricular activities, and especially for the student who's commuting. In somewhere between 60 and 80% of students are commuters, and as many as 20% are commuters who are dependent and live at home, to work out all the home and family responsibilities. So you have all the issues of sort of our social life, that where the parents still have an investment, a viewpoint, and involvement, and are supplying part or most of the funds. But a lot of issues to decide.
Students feel really bad about that, I think, in a hidden way again. Like, I can't make my own way, and here's my parents sort of scraping and paying for this. And again, that would have to be talked out, it seems to me, in some way or another.
We have a parent. Remember, I was talking at an earlier time with you about the typology of parents, and we have a one parent, and this is an extreme case, but the parent who we call the gratifier. And this is the parent who uses the power of the purse to maintain control over a college student. And, for example, the father who delays sending his daughter money that he'd promised her for expenses if she neglected to call home often enough. And then the girl might have to borrow money from friends, and when she did call home, her manner wasn't maybe what her parents expected, and they'd say, well, can't you treat us with more respect? And then this went on, and they reneged on their agreement, and then the daughter got resentful, and you see the parent who uses money and support as a way to try and buy what is not forthcoming automatically, and to try and do that generally backfires.
Norm, we've been talking here, running out of time, by the way, talking about ways that parents can support their offspring. The presenting problem is that of depression, and which can get even to the extreme of suicide. It has a lot to do with loneliness, of being in a new environment, leaving the familiar, as you made very clear, and also having these conflicts that produce anger and hostility within people. And what we're trying to remind people is that that's going to happen, and that the college experience promotes a certain degree of that precisely because of its unfamiliarity, but that there's ways to deal with this. And you've made some good suggestions about parents trying to be careful of this, trying to be open in communication, trying to reduce the tensions that exist. And I think in your book, really, Parenting Through the College Years, you've done an excellent job of providing that kind of advice for parents.
You've been listening to Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo. Today, Father Bacik talked with Norman Gadan, who is the head of the Counseling Center at the University of Toledo. The topic of this week's Reflections was college and the family, dealing with depression. If you have any comments on today's show or suggestions for future programs, please write Father James Bacik, Catholic Campus Ministry, 2086 Brookdale Drive, Toledo, Ohio, 43606. Funding for this program was provided by the Catholic Communications Commission of the Diocese of Toledo.